She was 23, broke, and 3 days away from losing everything. He was a billionaire who had destroyed over 40 careers with a single snap of his fingers. When she spilled a drop of wine on his table, he pulled out a gun and told her to shoot. But what happened next shocked everyone in that room and changed both their lives forever. This is the true story of Rose Mitchell, the waitress who did the unthinkable. She didn't beg for mercy. She didn't apologize. Instead, she looked that billionaire dead in the eye and said 5 words that no one had ever dared to say to him before. And those 5 words, they turned a $40 billion empire upside down. If you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever faced someone who thought they owned you, if you've ever wondered whether courage really matters when you have nothing, then you need to hear this story, because what Rose did that night proved something incredible. The strongest weapon you have isn't money or power, it's the truth. Stay with me. This story will give you chills, break your heart, and maybe, just maybe, change the way you see yourself. Let's begin. Like the video and subscribe. Join our family. We have so many more stories to share with you. Let me tell you about a woman who changed everything with nothing but courage and a sharp mind. People called him the Destroyer, not because he built things, but because he crushed people. His name was Daniel Cross, and he was one of the richest real estate developers in Los Angeles. 41 years old, cold as winter, and famous for one terrible thing. He had never let a server finish their shift without breaking them down. For 7 long years, the staff at Belle Cuisine, the fanciest restaurant in Beverly Hills, lived in fear of this man. He would walk in, sit at his usual corner table, and wait. Wait for one tiny mistake, one wrong word, 1 second of delay, and then careers destroyed, dreams shattered. People fired on the spot and blacklisted from every high-end restaurant in the city. The rain was pouring down that Wednesday evening in October. Inside Belle Cuisine, the atmosphere was thick with fear. It was 6:45 in the evening, and the manager, a nervous man named Robert, was practically shaking as he called the staff together. "Listen to me carefully," Robert said, his voice trembling. "Mr. Cross will be here in 10 minutes. We've lost 4 senior servers because of him in the past 3 months. Jennifer is still in therapy from their last encounter. Who's going to take table 7? Nobody spoke. You could hear a pin drop. The waiters and waitresses all suddenly became very interested in their shoes. Serving Daniel Cross was like volunteering to jump off a cliff. You knew you wouldn't survive." Then from the back of the kitchen, a voice spoke up. "I'll do it." Everyone turned around. It was a young woman named Rose Mitchell. She was 23 years old with tired eyes that told stories of long nights and hard work. She'd only been working at Belle Cuisine for 3 weeks as a food runner, the lowest position in the restaurant. Her job was to carry plates, not talk to important guests. Robert looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "You, Rose, you're just a runner. You don't even know our wine collection. Mr. Cross will destroy you before you even place the bread on his table." Rose took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them hidden in her apron pockets. "I need the extra pay, Robert. My rent is due in 2 days and I'm already behind. If I take this table, I get the senior server's share, right?" Robert glanced at the clock. 6:58. He was out of options and out of time. "Fine," he said sharply, "but when he ruins your life, don't say I didn't warn you. And Rose, whatever you do, don't speak to him unless he directly asks you something. He hates hearing from people like us." Rose nodded and pushed through the kitchen doors just as the front entrance swung open. The entire restaurant changed in that moment. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. 2 security guards walked in first, their eyes scanning every corner. And then Daniel Cross entered. He was a striking man, tall and lean, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Rose had earned in her entire life. His face was sharp, handsome in a harsh way, and completely emotionless. He didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge the staff. He walked straight to table 7 like a king entering his throne room. He sat down and placed 2 things on the white tablecloth, a black credit card and an expensive silver stopwatch. He pressed the button on the watch. The test had begun. Rose took a moment to steady herself. She picked up the picture of ice water filtered and chilled to exactly the temperature he demanded and walked toward the table. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She poured the water carefully, not a single drop spilled. She didn't say hello. She didn't welcome him. She simply placed the menu down and stepped back into the shadows. Daniel didn't open the menu. Instead, he stared at the water glass. He lifted it, examined it closely, checking for fingerprints or imperfections, and then set it down. 32 seconds, he said quietly. His voice was deep and cold, acceptable. Rose felt a tiny bit of relief wash over her. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. But then Daniel spoke again. However, the ice cubes are square. I prefer round. It reduces delusion. He finally looked up at her. His eyes were a piercing gray like steel. They cut right through her. You're new, he said. It wasn't a question. Where is Thomas? Thomas was let go, sir, Rose said softly. Unfortunate. He knew about the ice. Daniel tapped his finger on the table. You have 90 seconds to bring me a glass with round ice. If you fail, don't bother coming back. Just send Robert to fire you. Rose grabbed the glass. She didn't run, but she moved fast. Her mind was racing. In the kitchen, chaos erupted. Round ice, she shouted. He wants round ice. We don't have the molds ready, the bartender yelled back. It takes hours to freeze them properly. Rose felt panic rising in her chest. She had maybe 70 seconds left. Her eyes darted around the kitchen desperately. Then she saw it. A large block of clear ice sitting at the carving station used for the seafood display. She grabbed an ice pick and a small knife. Rose, what are you doing? Robert screamed. You can't carve ice for him. Watch me, she whispered. With hands that somehow stayed steady despite her fear, she started chipping away at the ice block. Scape the corners. 45 seconds. It was rough and uneven. She grabbed a warm towel and rubbed the ice, smoothing it until it was almost round. She dropped it into a fresh glass, poured the cold water, and hurried back out. Daniel was staring at his stopwatch. 1 minute 57 seconds. He looked at the glass. He examined the hand-carved, slightly imperfect sphere floating in the water. He paused, then he took a sip. Rose waited, barely breathing. Crude, Daniel said quietly but resourceful. And that's when Rose realized something. Maybe, just maybe, she had a chance to survive this night after all. Daniel set the glass down and closed the menu without even looking at it. Rose felt a knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't normal. Guests always ordered from the menu. I'm not interested in what's written here, Daniel said, his voice flat and emotionless. I want something that's not on this menu. Tell the chef to make me the soup his grandmother used to make him when he was sick as a child. Not the fancy stuff, the simple, honest soup. Rose blinked. The head chef, Antoine, was a world-famous culinary artist who had trained in Paris. He didn't make simple soups, he created masterpieces. Sir, the chef, Rose started to say. If you argue with me, you're fired, Daniel interrupted, not even looking at her. You have 15 minutes. Rose rushed back to the kitchen. Her heart was racing. He wants your grandmother's soup, she told Antoine. The soup she made you when you were sick. The entire kitchen went silent. Antoine, a large man with a thick mustache, turned red in the face. What did you say? He doesn't want anything from the menu, Rose explained, her words tumbling out fast. He specifically asked for the soup your grandmother made you. That is insulting, Antoine shouted. I am a master chef. I don't serve peasant food in a place like this. Antoine, please, Rose said, stepping closer and lowering her voice. He knows. Somehow, he knows about your grandmother's recipe. If we don't send it out, he'll ruin this restaurant. You know he has that power. Antoine slammed his knife on the cutting board. He looked at the clock, then back at Rose. His face softened just a little. It is potato leek soup. Simple ingredients, potatoes, leeks, cream, salt. Nothing special. It is what poor people eat. Please make it, Rose begged, for all of us. For the next 12 minutes, Rose watched as the great chef Antoine made the simplest soup of his career. No fancy garnishes, no expensive ingredients, just honest homemade cooking. When Rose carried the bowl out to Daniel's table, her hands were shaking so badly she thought she might drop it. She placed it in front of him. Daniel stared at the creamy white soup. No decoration, he observed. Good. He picked up the silver spoon on the table and took a bite. He held it in his mouth for a long moment. Rose watched his face carefully. For just a split second, she saw something she didn't expect. Emotion, pain, memory. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. It lacks salt, Daniel said coldly. He pushed the bowl away. Take it away. It's terrible. Rose felt anger flash through her body. She had watched Antoine make that soup. She had smelled it. It was perfect. And suddenly she knew something about Daniel Cross that he didn't realize she knew. She didn't take the bowl away. Sir, Rose said quietly. Daniel looked up, his eyes narrowing dangerously. I told you to remove this. It doesn't lack salt, Rose said. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was pounding. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Robert, standing by the entrance, covered his face with his hands. This was it, the moment of destruction. Daniel turned his whole body toward her. Excuse me, it doesn't lack salt, Rose repeated. You're using a silver spoon. Daniel said nothing. He just stared at her. Silver reacts with sulfur compounds in the leaks, Rose explained. She remembered this from her high school chemistry class and from her father, who used to work with metals before his accident. It creates a metallic taste that makes you think there's not enough salt. You're not really tasting the soup properly, Mr. Cross. You're tasting the spoon. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. A couple at a nearby table stopped eating. Everyone was watching. You're contradicting me, Daniel said slowly. I'm correcting you, Rose replied. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a ceramic spoon she grabbed from the kitchen just in case. Try it with this. Ceramic doesn't react with food. You'll taste the real flavor. She held the spoon out to him. It was a battle of wills, the billionaire versus the struggling waitress. Daniel stared at the spoon. Then he stared at Rose's determined face. Slowly, he took the ceramic spoon from her hand. He dipped it into the soup and tasted it again. He stopped, his eyes closed. The flavor was completely different. Warm, comforting, perfect, exactly like he remembered. He opened his eyes and looked at Rose with a new kind of intensity. What's your name? Rose. Rose Mitchell. Rose, he said, testing the name on his tongue. You have a bold spirit. That can be dangerous. The truth is only dangerous to people who prefer lies, Rose said, and immediately regretted it. Why did I say that? I'm definitely getting fired now. Daniel stared at her for what felt like forever. Then something incredible happened. He laughed. It was a short, rusty sound, like he'd forgotten how to do it. Truth, he repeated. Interesting. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. It was completely black with just a phone number printed in gold. I'm hosting a private business dinner this Saturday at my estate in Malibu. My usual staff is incompetent. They lack your attention to detail. He slid the card across the table. Be there at 5 in the evening. I'll pay you $8,000 for one night's work. Rose's jaw dropped. $8,000. That would solve all her problems. That would save her apartment. That would help pay her sister's medical bills. But, Daniel added, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, if you make one single mistake, if you speak out of turn like you just did, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Do we understand each other? Rose looked at the black card. She looked at the man who was known as a destroyer of lives. Every instinct told her to say no, to run far away. I'll be there, she heard herself say. The estate wasn't just a house. It was a kingdom sitting on the cliffs of Malibu overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Daniel Cross's home was a modern fortress made of glass and steel. They called it the Edge because it literally hung over the cliff's edge as if daring the ocean to reach up and claim it. Rose's taxi driver refused to go past the massive iron gates. This is as far as I take you, miss, he said nervously, looking at the security cameras. Private property beyond this point. Rose got out, clutching her small bag. She was wearing her best black dress and simple flats, but standing in front of those 20-foot gates. She felt like a child pretending to be an adult. She pressed the intercom button. Rose Mitchell, I'm here for the dinner service. The gates silently swung open. No buzzer, no voice, just the eerie, smooth movement of heavy metal. She walked up the long driveway lined with tall cypress trees that blocked out the late afternoon sun. When the house finally came into view, she gasped. It was stunning and terrifying at the same time. All glass walls and sharp angles looking like it might slice the sky itself. A woman was waiting at the front door. She was around 60 years old, wearing a gray suit, her silver hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. "You're late," the woman said sharply, "by 4 minutes." "The gate was," Rose started. "Mr. Cross values punctuality above everything else," the woman interrupted. "I'm Mrs. Palmer. Follow me." Rose stepped inside. The entrance was cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling. The floor was polished black marble, so shiny it reflected everything like a dark mirror. There was no furniture, just a single twisted metal sculpture in the center that looked like a frozen screen. "Your phone," Mrs. Palmer said, holding out a plastic container. "Excuse me. No devices are allowed during Mr. Cross's private events. Non-disclosure agreements were signed electronically when you accepted this job. Security is essential." Rose hesitated. Her phone was her only connection to the outside world. To her sister Lily, who was in the hospital. What if there's an emergency? $8,000. "Miss Mitchell," Mrs. Palmer said coldly, "that's the price of privacy." Rose dropped her phone into the container. It felt like cutting off her lifeline. Mrs. Palmer led her through hallways that felt more like an art gallery than a home. They passed a room filled with computer screens, security cameras showing every corner of the estate. Rose shivered. They arrived at a large kitchen. Mrs. Palmer turned to face her. "Let me be clear about tonight. This is not a party. It's a negotiation. There are 3 guests coming. They are some of the most powerful people in the real estate and investment world. Mr. Cross is not just the host, he's the judge." "Judge of what?" Rose asked. "You'll see. You're the only server tonight? The regular staff has been given the evening off. Mr. Cross specifically requested an outsider, someone who doesn't know who these people are." "So I'm supposed to serve because I'm nobody," Rose said quietly. "Precisely. You pour the wine, you clear the plates, you don't speak, you don't react. If someone insults you, you don't hear it. If someone throws food at you, you clean it up. Do you understand?" "Yes, good. Now change." Mrs. Palmer pointed to a garment bag hanging on a hook. Rose opened it. Inside was not a server's uniform. It was an evening gown, a floor-length dress in deep midnight blue silk. It was beautiful, elegant, and completely wrong for serving food. "I can't work in this," Rose said, touching the delicate fabric. "It's not practical." "It's what Mr. Cross ordered," Mrs. Palmer interrupted, checking her watch. "He wants the visual to be perfect." "You're not just a server tonight, Rose. You're part of the atmosphere. Put it on." Rose changed in a small room off the kitchen. The dress fit perfectly, too perfectly. "How did you know my size?" she wondered, feeling uncomfortable. When she emerged, Mrs. Palmer nodded once. "The guests are arriving. Go to the dining room. The wine is ready. Remember, you're invisible." Rose walked toward the dining room, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Her heart was hammering. Something felt wrong about all of this. This wasn't just a job. This was something else entirely. The dining room was breathtaking. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a view of the dark ocean below. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and red. A long black table sat in the center, lit only by candles and an enormous crystal chandelier above. Daniel Cross stood at the head of the table looking out at the waves. He was wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He didn't turn when Rose entered. "Do you know why I chose this house?" he asked. Rose stopped. "No, sir. Because out here, cell phone reception doesn't work well, and the waves are loud enough to cover any sound." He turned to face her. His gray eyes scanned her dress. "It fits. It's difficult to move in," Rose admitted. "Restriction creates focus," Daniel replied. "The guests are here. Pour the champagne." The double doors opened. 3 people walked in, and Rose immediately felt the tension in the room thickened like fog. The first was a short, balding man with nervous eyes. The second was an elderly woman dripping in diamonds, her face hard as stone. The third was a younger man, maybe 35, handsome but with empty eyes. Welcome, Daniel said, spreading his arms. Please sit. They sat, but they weren't friends. These were enemies forced to be in the same room. Rose stepped forward with the champagne bottle, her hand steady despite her racing heart. And that's when she realized she wasn't here to serve dinner. She was here to witness something far more dangerous. Rose moved carefully around the table, pouring golden champagne into crystal glasses. The tension in the room was so thick she could barely breathe. I didn't think you'd actually call this meeting, Daniel, the elderly woman said. Her name was Patricia Hartwell, and she owned half the commercial properties in downtown Los Angeles. I thought you were bluffing. I never bluffed, Patricia, Daniel said smoothly. You should know that by now. Rose moved to the nervous man. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold the stem of his glass. Is it true? He whispered, his voice cracking. Do you really have the documents? We'll discuss business after the first course, Daniel said, smiling in a way that made Rose's skin crawl. Tonight is about civilized conversation first. Consequences later. The third man, whose name Rose learned was Victor Kane, looked up at her as she poured his champagne. I haven't seen you before, he said, his voice rough. Are you new? Focus, Victor, Daniel snapped. The staff isn't here for your entertainment. Rose finished pouring and stepped back into the shadows, her heart pounding. She watched as the first course was brought out by silent kitchen staff who disappeared immediately. Scallops with some kind of fancy sauce. Let's begin, Daniel said, picking up his fork. He looked at the nervous man. Lawrence, I hear your development project in Santa Monica is having troubles. Something about permits being mysteriously denied. Lawrence's fork clattered against his plate. That's confidential information. Is it? Daniel smiled that cold smile again. Or is it because the city inspector found out about the shortcuts you took with the foundation? The ones that could collapse the building in an earthquake? Lawrence went pale. How did you? Nothing is confidential, Lawrence, Daniel interrupted. Not when you have access to the right people. Patricia laughed a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, stop torturing the man, Daniel. We all know you've been digging into our businesses. What do you want? What I want, Daniel said, taking a sip of champagne. Is loyalty, cooperation, control? Rose felt sick to her stomach. She was watching Daniel systematically destroy these people one by one. He had dirt on all of them, and he was using it like a weapon. Lawrence, Daniel continued, I'll make this simple. You sign over the controlling interest in your company to my firm, or I release the inspection reports to the media. Your investors will disappear overnight. Lawrence put his head in his hands. I worked 20 years to build that company, and you'll work 20 more in prison if that building falls down. Daniel said coldly, Choose wisely. Fine, Lawrence whispered. It's yours. Daniel smiled. Excellent. Rose, refill Mr. Lawrence's glass. He looks thirsty. Rose approached the table with shaking hands. She poured more champagne, trying to stay invisible, trying not to think about what she was witnessing. Then Daniel turned his attention to Patricia. Now, Patricia, let's talk about your grandson. Patricia's entire body went rigid. Leave my family alone. I wish I could, Daniel said, pulling out a manila envelope from beside his chair. But your grandson has been making some very poor choices online in places where he thought he was anonymous. He slid the envelope across the table. Take a look. Patricia's hand trembled as she opened it. Rose saw her face drain of all color. Whatever was in those photos, it was devastating. What do you want? Patricia asked, her voice barely audible. I want your shipping contracts, Daniel said. All of them. Exclusive rights to transport materials for my construction projects at my prices. Those contracts are worth millions, Patricia whispered. It would bankrupt my company. Better bankrupt than exposed, Daniel said without emotion. Patricia closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. Agreed. Rose stood frozen against the wall. This wasn't business. This was destruction. This was evil. Rose, Daniel called out, bring the wine, the expensive one. Rose moved to the wine station. Her mind was racing. She was trapped here, witnessing crimes, watching people's lives being destroyed, and she was being paid to serve drinks while it happened. She picked up the bottle, some ridiculously expensive wine she couldn't even pronounce. As she approached Daniel's glass, her hands started shaking, not from fear, but from disgust. A single drop of red wine splashed onto the white tablecloth. The entire room went silent. Lawrence looked up. Patricia opened her eyes. Victor held his breath. Daniel stared at the red stain. It was tiny, no bigger than a dime, but it looked like blood on the pure white fabric. He slowly looked up at Rose. "You spilled." "I'm sorry, sir," Rose said, her voice trembling. "It was an accident." "I don't believe in accidents," Daniel said quietly, standing up. "I believe in carelessness." He walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You've seen a lot tonight, Rose. You've watched powerful people break. You've learned secrets that could destroy entire companies." He leaned close to her ear. "And now you've stained my table." He reached into his jacket pocket. Rose's heart stopped. He pulled out something black and metal. "A gun?" Rose gasped and stumbled backward. Lawrence screamed. Patricia covered her mouth. Daniel placed the gun on the table. "The stain must be removed," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Pick up the gun." "No," Rose whispered. "Pick it up," Daniel commanded, his voice rising, pointed at the stain. "Shoot it. Show me you have the will to destroy imperfection." Rose looked at the gun. She looked at the tiny wine stain. She looked at Daniel's face. This was insane. This was a test, but she didn't understand what he wanted. Her father had been a security guard. She knew guns, and as she stared at this one, something seemed wrong. The weight looked off. The balance was strange. She picked up the gun slowly. Everyone in the room held their breath, and then Rose did something unexpected. She lowered the weapon. "No," she said firmly. "Shoot the stain or you don't get paid," Daniel threatened. "No," Rose repeated. She placed the gun back on the table. "Because this isn't a gun, it's a lighter." Silence. "What?" Lawrence blinked. Rose picked it up again and pointed it at the nearest candle. She pulled the trigger. A small flame shot out of the barrel. It was a novelty lighter shaped like a gun. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The room was frozen in time. Then Daniel Cross did something Rose had never seen him do. He threw his head back and laughed. Not the cold, rusty laugh from the restaurant, but a real, genuine laugh that echoed off the glass walls. "Brilliant!" he shouted, clapping his hands together. "Absolutely brilliant." He turned to his 3 terrified guests. "You see, you 3 are cowards. You saw a gun because you expected violence, you expected fear." She saw the truth because she actually looked. She paid attention. He walked over to Rose and took the lighter from her hand. "You passed," he said quietly so only she could hear. "Passed what?" Rose asked, her legs feeling weak. "The real test," Daniel said. "The soup was your resume. The dinner tonight was the examination. And you, Rose Mitchell, are the first person in 7 years who hasn't flinched when it mattered." He turned back to the table. "All of you get out. Our business is done. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow with the contracts." Lawrence, Patricia, and Victor practically ran from the room, desperate to escape. Rose stood alone in the dining room with Daniel Cross. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below. The candles flickered. "What happens now?" Rose asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel poured himself a glass of wine, completely unbothered by the stain on the tablecloth. "Now I tell you the real reason you're here." He turned to face her, and for the first time, his mask slipped. She saw something in his eyes. Pain, loneliness, desperation. "I know about your sister," he said softly. "Lily, 20 years old, rare autoimmune disease. The medical bills are over $200,000, and insurance won't cover the treatment." Rose felt her blood run cold. "How do you know about Lily?" "I know everything, Rose," Daniel said, moving closer. "And I'm going to make you an offer. I'll pay for everything. The best doctors in the world. Treatment at the Mayo Clinic. Experimental therapies. Whatever it takes to save her life." Rose's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "What do you want in return?" Daniel looked out at the dark ocean. "I need a wife." Rose blinked. "A what? A wife?" Daniel repeated, turning back to her. Not a real one, a business arrangement. My grandfather left a clause in his will to take full control of the Cross Development Corporation. I must be married. A stable family man, he called it. The board members you saw tonight are trying to take the company from me. If I'm married, they can't. Why me? Rose asked. You could marry anyone, someone rich, someone famous. I can't marry an insider, Daniel interrupted. Patricia would sell my secrets. Lawrence would sabotage my projects. Victor would betray me for money. I need someone who has no connections to my world, someone who owes me everything. He pulled a thick document from his jacket. 1-year contract. You play the role of devoted fiancée, then wife. You live in my penthouse. You attend events. You smile for cameras. In return, I pay Lily's medical bills immediately. She gets transferred to the best hospital tomorrow, and at the end of the year, you walk away with $3 million. Rose felt dizzy. $3 million. It was impossible to imagine, but Lily, sweet, kind Lily, who was dying in a hospital bed, she could be saved. What are the rules? Rose asked. Simple, Daniel said. Complete loyalty. You tell no one the truth, not even Lily. And no romance. This is a business merger, not a love story. We share space, not intimacy. He checked his watch. If you say no, you go back to your life, back to poverty, back to watching Lily fade away. If you say yes, everything changes. It wasn't really a choice at all. Rose picked up the pen sitting next to the contract. I have one condition, she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're not in a position to negotiate. I'm not your property, Rose said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. If I do this, I do it with dignity. I pick my own clothes. I speak for myself. If you treat me like a servant in public, I walk away. Deal or no deal. Daniel studied her face. He looked at the fire in her eyes, the strength in her spine, and for the first time in years, he looked almost impressed. Agreed, he said. Rose signed the paper. The ink looked black as night. Welcome to the family, Rose, Daniel said, taking the contract back. Your old life ends tonight. 3 months later, Rose stood in front of the mirror in the penthouse bedroom, adjusting her wedding dress. It was simple, elegant, white as snow. In a few hours, she would marry Daniel Cross in front of hundreds of people and cameras from around the world. But something had changed over the past 3 months. Lily was getting better. The experimental treatment was working. She was laughing again, walking again, living again. And Daniel had changed too. The cold, ruthless businessman had slowly revealed cracks in his armor. Rose learned that his cruelty came from pain. His mother had abandoned him as a child. His father had taught him that love was weakness. He built walls so high nobody could reach him. But Rose had started to reach him, not through force, but through simple human kindness. She challenged him when he was wrong. She defended people he tried to crush. She showed him that strength didn't require cruelty. There was a knock on the door. Come in, Rose said. Daniel entered wearing his tuxedo. He stopped when he saw her. You look beautiful, he said softly. It's not real, remember? Rose said, but her voice was gentle. It's just business. Daniel walked closer. Rose, I need to tell you something. What? I'm tearing up the contract, he said. Rose's heart sank. You're firing me, but Lily. No. Daniel interrupted, taking her hands. I'm tearing it up because I don't want a fake marriage anymore. I want a real one. I want a partner who challenges me. I want the woman who saw through my tests and called me on my cruelty. He looked into her eyes. I know I don't deserve you. I know I've been a terrible person, but you've shown me that I can be better. Will you still marry me? Not for business. For real? Rose looked at the man who had started as a destroyer and slowly became human. On one condition, she said, What's that? You stop tearing people down and start building them up. Use your power for good, Daniel. Help people instead of hurting them. Daniel smiled, a real warm smile. Deal. And in that moment, Rose realized something beautiful. Sometimes the most broken people just need someone brave enough to see past their walls. She had walked into his world with nothing but courage and honesty, and she'd changed everything. The ceremony was beautiful. The cameras flashed. The world watched as the destroyer married the waitress. But only they knew the real story, how a struggling server had saved not just her sister's life, but the soul of a man who'd forgotten how to be human. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay true to yourself. Even when facing giants, Rose didn't have money or status, but she had something more valuable: integrity, courage, and the wisdom to see beyond the surface. She proved that real strength isn't about power or wealth. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you have everything to lose. Like the video and subscribe? Join our family. We have so many more stories to share with you.